Hey everyone, wanted to give a shout out to Sarona Design for providing, obviously paid for, providing some accents for the 21 Durango TNG here. Awesome job that those guys do up in Woodside or Queens, New York. Obviously you can get your stuff shipped to you, but if you want them to pre-paint it to match the body, they definitely want you to come in to have it installed because of all the associated risks of shipping and damages and people claiming not matching or fitting or whatever else. So do a quick walk around here to do some call outs. We have the spoiler at the top is what we got from Sarona. A nice sleek look here. We have the rear mid spoiler from Sarona. We have the rear diffuser. This is a tow and go, so this thing actually does have the little bolt-on piece that you can take off to get to your tow hitch. And then all the way on the front we ended up getting eyelids for the headlights. We got the grill with the snorkels. Yes, I know the snorkels are in opposite direction of what factory does. That's on purpose. I can explain later why. And the front chin spoiler. As we're talking about the different modifications cosmetically, the exteriors, this is a RT, but it's the tow and go package. So what we learned over time is that actually just about all body components are at least the same as an SRT. So what I get constantly questioned about is, well, wait a minute, why do you have SRT brakes? Or did you put some kind of covers or stickers on your brakes to say SRT? Well, no, it's because tow and go package of the RT Durango, at least 2021, which this is, has components of an SRT, just about all of them, except obviously for the engine, maybe a couple of interior comfort features or buttons or whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's a really important call out to make because there's a difference when it comes to at least Sarona aftermarket parts of what model you order. So the model numbers that you would see in the video are not necessarily the correct fit. Please make sure to check with those guys for the exact fitment of your car. In fact, it's even better to give them a VIN number so they can validate exactly what parts of theirs will fit. So just because we're doing call outs for different part numbers in this does not necessarily mean that they will fit the specific model that you have. So just like I said, just about everything on here, and definitely including the front grille. Maybe not necessarily the splitter. The chin splitter might be all right. The grill definitely has different model depending on whether it's a tow and go or GT, RT, SRT. The rear spoiler up top is definitely dependent on that. The mid spoiler, I believe, does not matter and absolutely makes a difference for the bottom. Moved it indoors so we don't have to faint from the excessive heat that's happening in our area. So let's start from the front as far as individual components. We got the Sarona front chin splitter, chin spoiler, whatever you want to call it. This one is the more kind of rounded look to it. Has like a nice little in-depth kind of crease bend. Follows the contours of the bumper. If you look at it from the top, there's certainly some jut out, but not as extreme as some of the other front chin spoilers, including ones that Sarona makes. Thought that this design would kind of flow better for appearance sake, at least for my preference. And here's kind of on the side. This was painted and mounted at Sarona, so I really didn't look underneath too much to see how they did it and whether or not they used any kind of adhesive. The measurements, not to waste too much time, but like the width of this thing, this is just a little bit more than the body of the car itself. If we're talking about the separation from the body, it looks like it's about an inch or so on the sides. And then if you kind of look at top to bottom, how far it protrudes from the front, looks like about an inch and a half or so, depending where you measure. Obviously it's a little wider on the corners, so like at the widest part, sticks out from the bottom about 2.5 inches. at the narrowest part, which I have about here. No, actually no, it looks like about 2 inches here too, so maybe I just didn't measure right. About 2 inch all around, expanding out a little bit. And then the height, I guess if there is such a thing, for this would be about 4-ish inches or so is what you get to cover up. The pros, again, it's nice, thick, resilient, and I guess if there's one thing I could pick to say is a con, it's that you get accumulation of dust inside of here that you have to kind of reach in and carefully get out of there when you're detailing the car. I mean, obviously underneath, you got to be able to get underneath there, but it's more reachable inside under the front bumper than it is on the sides, but again, totally doable. Move the car indoors to avoid heat exhaustion. Looking at eyelids, Sarona eyelids, approximately 19, maybe 18, depending how you measure it, 18 and a half total length. They are kind of thicker over here on the outside, thinning in as you go towards the grill. Measurements as far as how much they stick out, just like a fraction of an inch, or like barely a half an inch, and then it goes wider to the on the thickest part, looks like about 1.5 inches. It does this little wraparound. They are mounted over the top of the headlight where they adhere to it, and again, this can be color matched or painted differently if you prefer it. Let's talk about the grill. So the grill with the snorkels or nostrils, depending what you call them. Definitely get like 2 schools of thought on that. One is that it's backwards, that technically the nostrils really should be more like the Charger has them, and flipped around so that it kind of follows the contours of the outside of the grill. Other school of thought is this looks cool and unique. So obviously I'm with column B, and the most obvious reason for why these guys are producing it this way is to not interfere with any trademarks or patents from Dodge. I mean, if you want a grill that looks just like Dodge, buy a Dodge grill and retrofit it to the car. This is prefabbed by a third-party manufacturer, so they are not a Dodge distributor. So of course they're going to fabricate something that they're not going to get sued for. So next best effort. I think it looks cool. It's up to you all. Mine came because I asked for it, custom painted to sort of match the stripes. I should have gone maybe a little bit darker, but it still looks good. There is kind of a nice side effect. Disregard the rusted nail, or a screw, I mean. Side effect is you can much easier get to the horns if you decided to mess with those. What I can say is that this whole piece definitely requires removal of front bumper, no question about it. I saw the whole thing sitting out before they put it in for me. It's certainly much beefier than the original grill, especially with this bottom part here. And then there's underneath the bumper, there's like an entire support, kind of like a beam almost, to ensure that this thing is nice and sturdy and sits right. So looks pretty cool in my opinion. Get some head turns, and again, either you love it or hate it, up to you. We have the rear wing spoiler, so sits on top of the original factory one, and looks like so. It has kind of like a nice elevation, kind of upward almost. There's a bit of a kind of a bump up, and then it continues on over across the rear spoiler. Looks pretty slick. I gotta say, I really like the way that this came out. Obviously painted to match. Those guys put it on as well. And as far as any kind of measurements, well, the sides are almost exactly the same as the factory spoiler, since they're supposed to cover it up for the most part. So you see that there on the about 4.5 inches on the thicker end. And then as far as how far it juts out from the rear spoiler itself, well, looks like it's about 3 inches or so on the narrowest part. And no, it's about 3 inches all around, actually. Sorry. And then 3.5 inches or so on the thicker part. So 3 inches here, 3.5 inches this way. Still trying to figure out if I'm going to do stripes over it to do the continuation or kind of leave it like this, because it has a certain look to it that I kind of like. Then we got the mid trunk lid spoiler. So factory doesn't have anything like these. There are all sorts of variations of these spoilers out there. These guys, I believe, have the best one, or at least the design that I really enjoyed getting put on. So kind of starts out here with this sort of thicker part, and then bumps out, narrows down, but also has these like fins in the middle, which I thought was kind of cool looking. And again, painted to match the color of the car. And as far as measurements are concerned, we got about 3.5 inches or so on the thinner part, sticking out on the thicker part to about 5 or so inches. And then again, kind of the profile of this thing is kind of upward, similar to how the top spoiler is. So that's one of the reasons I chose the top spoiler this way. The mid spoiler was already on. I put the top later, but I wanted to have that sort of similar effect of going upwards. And of course we have the rear diffuser. We're going to do a separate bit about the aftermarket exhaust that's on here, so no worries there. So this is obviously not something that comes factory for just about everybody, except maybe Hellcats. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. Most other models, they have a smooth kind of slanted rear valance which has to come out, and this gets put on instead. I chose to color match mine. You can obviously paint it some other color, but again, just another reminder, the guys at Sarona really prefer that you are there to have it installed if you're having them paint it, as opposed to having it delivered, primed, and you have to paint it local. So in this instance, this is a tow and go RT, so the option that we have here is the one where you can pop off the center piece just like you can with the factory, so that you can get to the tow hook or the tow insert, whatever you want to call that. Dual exhaust obviously, and you have 3 primary fins. You have kind of these exhaust surrounds, which also look, I guess, kind of like minor fins depending the angle that you're looking at, and then it tends to kind of jut out. And I should have had a tape measure for this. I don't, that's all right. But this is roughly, what, about a 1/2 inch or so that it juts out beyond the bumper. The factory valance, the one that's smooth and plastic or whatever it is flush against this section. So this is the car's original bumper. This is how far this thing juts out beyond it, as opposed to the factory. So the one call out, depending on how stylistically you prefer to do things. When we had this on here, and I should have taken pictures, but we had the factory exhaust. The factory exhaust was an SRT exhaust, because that's what tow and go comes with, and it is, the actual exhaust outlet is cut at a slant. So when you end up putting this on and it juts out and it sits over the factory exhaust, it almost looks too far buried. The upper part of the factory exhaust is sort of close, maybe slightly inside, but the bottom part really ends up looking like it's buried on the inside. I was definitely not a fan of that. That is not the reason why we did the aftermarket exhaust, but still, just wanted to call that out stylistically, that when you put one of these guys on the aftermarket, you're going to want to consider what that would look like and what the exhaust itself is going to look like once you're driving around.